I meant to take you all down quickly. Okay, well, here it is. Views on the news time of the week again. And we have, after the intro, a new panel.
Russell was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?
I should have said partly new, shouldn't I? Because we've got some regulars here, including Guy from Manchester. Welcome, Guy.
Hello.
Paul from Eastbourne. These are three Englishmen. Yep. But new to the panel is Boudreau from Kentucky. Welcome, Boudreau.
Hello.
You and I used to be on a show some time ago. What was it called? The
Let's Chat, or
one of those. Yeah. I think I was the lone Brit on that show. Anyway, welcome. And of course, welcome Seth, who, if you watched last night's Free Thought Hour, you would have seen Seth, and he's accepted my invitation to join us on the panel. He's based in Boston, and
Thanks for having me back.
Sorry?
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. And he's a cutting-edge medical scientist. Genomics is his specialism. Listen, the show we did last night was red hot. I thoroughly recommend you to watch it. I'm now clipping it and putting little bits of it up on the channel for other people to see who haven't got the time to spend watching an hour-long show. Right, here we go with the roundup of the news. Now, unfortunately, in London, we've had pro-Palestine parades every weekend, and it's caused some of the, what you might call the native London population to feel a bit irate. And this has turned into anti-Semitism. The Jews are being targeted by nationalists. It's all quite horrible. And some of the Jews are now leaving London. And I don't think I can show you the video because I haven't had time to upload it into the software. But
well, I mean, can I comment, John? Because I mean, this is happening in Manchester as well, which also has a substantial Jewish population.
Yep.
And the irony is that the Jews who don't live in Israel are, by and large, but obviously not all of them, by and large, non-Zionist Jews, who many of whom don't even approve of the Zionist project.
No.
So it's completely inappropriate to target them, and they are feeling uncomfortable.
Yes.
But there is a growing sympathy with them as well, and with the plight of Israel. So I hope that they won't, feel totally unwelcome.
Yeah. The thing is, we've got sort of two categories here, haven't we? Anti-Semitism seems to be against Jews in general. What we should be doing is anti-Zionism against those who think they're the chosen people.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to come in on this? Welcome, Tersia, by the way. Tersia is from South Africa.
Sorry I'm late. Better late than never.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
I don't think it's a question of anti-Zionism. It's anti-extreme Zionism and anti-religious Zionism.
Yes.
There are people who identify as Zionists who've long been in the peace camp in Israel. And, Israel has a right to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we stand by that. Whether Zionism should have happened in the 1940s is a question, but we are where we are, and Israel exists, and people have got nowhere else to go. So
well,
Israel
that's right.
does have the right to it.
And there is also, isn't there, Paul, a non-state version of Zionism, a sort of more spiritual version. I don't know much about it, but I understand it does exist. Yeah.
So I'm a bit late to the conversation, but for what it's worth, it's something that is often spoken about in my family. My mom and dad watch the news. My husband and I follow the news. And just yesterday, we had a long discussion, my husband and I, about this whole problem. And same with my mom and dad. And the only thing that I have no solutions except that as long as people realize that they have to begin telling a rational story to find the solution, before that doesn't happen, I don't see a solution to the conflict in the Middle East. Because as long as you have groups, be they Christians, because many fundamentalist Christians support the idea that Israel is God's chosen people, and there has to be an Armageddon before Jesus will come back to save them and take them away. And then you have the other narrative, and as long as we that the Muslims have, as long as we have so many millions of people who refuse to move into rational discussions that says, right, so mistakes were made, things happened that shouldn't have happened, what are we going to do moving forward, without stubbornly holding on to outdated religious beliefs, I don't see any solution. And I'm not saying people have to stop believing what they believe. They just have to rethink the narrative that they are clinging to that is no longer serving any useful purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a video at the moment. I'm just uploading it now. And it's because a lot of the news this week was about the Middle East war and related issues of conflict. And I'm going to show you this one.
What's going on in the Middle East today is nothing new unless we are blind. Didn't we see the explosion in the port of Beirut? Where were we when the rockets fired by Hezbollah were threatening families and communities? Iran has never hidden its intentions. It kept financing and pushing its proxies, and we have always answered with the same lame talks and kept giving in, including within Europe. Nothing is new in the Middle East except the growing irrelevance of the EU. And did you notice how the French communists like Mélenchon and certain MEPs from his party have been mourning Nasrallah on their social media? They should know that Nasrallah's final exit is an opportunity to rebuild Lebanon, free from Hezbollah, free from corruption, dedicated to the Lebanese population. An opportunity to build a new Middle East without Hezbollah, without Hamas, without a destructive, powerful Iran, without radical Islam and brutal anti-Semitism. It is an opportunity for a safer world, including our home, Europe. Thank you.
That is Peter Kanko, MEP, speaking at the European Parliament. And I think a lot of us would agree with her sentiment that we want a solution. But how?
Yeah. As the only solution I can see is if there can be leaders who can convince people to just slightly alter the story, the narrative that they are clinging to so stubbornly, and just bring some rational thought into this situation, because the way it's going now, it's just there must be new ideas, there must be new stories must be told, new conversations must be had. And what worries me is I don't see Benjamin Netanyahu doing that, and I don't see Hamas doing that, and I don't know that there is leadership willing to tell a new story. And that is what is necessary. We need to tell a new story. To a very much lesser extent, South Africa as a country went through that. And I was in my early 20s when we had the crossover from the nationalist government to the new South Africa. And I know how difficult it was to change the story. And we just had to begin to tell one another new stories. And we were fortunate that we had leaders like F.W. de Klerk, and we had Nelson Mandela, who had the courage and the the charisma to get enough people to buy into the new story, and that's what's needed.
And you won the Rugby World Cup at the right moment too.
That was part of the story. That
Yes.
was part of the story.
Yeah.
In Northern Ireland, the problem, the beginning of the solution to the problem, was Republicans recognizing that unionists had a case, and unionists recognizing that Republicans had a case. And the same thing has to happen in Israel-Palestine.
Yeah.
Palestinians have to recognize that Israel has a case.
Very true.
And Israelis have to recognize that Palestinians have a case.
Yeah.
And until that happens, we're not getting anywhere. And certainly I don't see Netanyahu doing that. He's been sabotaging peace processes for 20 years. You know, that's his, and Hamas too.
And all this warfare, killing and destruction, even of the leaders, doesn't actually advance that peace project at all. It sets it back, if anything.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask Americans whether this issue has raised its head where they are. Have you had protest marches in Boston or in Kentucky? Do you have,
well, I can definitely say in Boston, specifically Somerville, has lots of very far left protest marches and a lot of far left pro-Palestinian narratives. I think there was one, especially on the college campuses. The college campuses are overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian and very Palestinian-centric in their narratives. There was a local news report showing that there was like this single Jewish activist who was trying to plant flags on a lawn to just represent the victims of the October 7th attack, and he was constantly getting harassed and bullied by all of the pro-Palestinian supporters. So I think on our side, it's a bit more black and white, and it's like it's used almost as this weird litmus test of like, if you you should speak exclusively in terms of Gazan civilian suffering because of the disproportionate numbers. But if there's any introduction of nuance whatsoever, they accuse you of being some right-wing Zionist. What in reality, this feels just like 9/11 and George W. Bush. You have a big attack. They were warned in advance. They brushed it off. They had a huge attack. They had a disproportionate response with an order of magnitude more civilian death for completely unrelated populations. And the whole thing was brought about because of short-sighted political maneuvering, trying to fixate on the West Bank. Netanyahu is just trying to consolidate power. He does not want Gaza and the West Bank to have the same government, so he's been trying to undermine Abbas. He underestimated Hamas as being a real threat and was willing to tacitly allow them to accumulate power despite Iran pulling the strings, because he was so fixated on keeping Abbas from consolidating power in the West Bank. Then it blew up in his face. But then, why look a gift horse in the mouth when you can utilize this as a way to further consolidate your own power? So I think, we speak of having strong charismatic leaders, but we also need leaders who are looking out for the best interests of the country itself. And, like Israel was on the verge of a groundbreaking trade agreement with Saudi Arabia, which many suspect is the reason why the timing of October 7th seems so suspect. Maybe Iran sent some, signal through their lines to say maybe now would be a good time, because of course Israel's going to disproportionately respond, cause and basically completely become a pariah on the global stage, let alone the Middle Eastern stage, and that will just completely kill any hope of Saudi Arabia and Israel having an economic partnership, which would be like a completely unacceptable outcome for Iran. So.
Because in Kentucky, the problem is Christianity, not a contest between Jews and Muslims. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, we're a pretty red state here. I will say the only place I've seen the pro-Palestine is on campus, University of Kentucky, where I work. There's been, quite a bit of, action in the last year. And I'd say the other thing that I noticed too is a friend of mine is pretty involved in his Jewish temple here in Lexington. And one of the things that's changed over the last many years, and more so in the last year, is security. They have to put a lot more thought into security for the safety of folks that attend temple.
Yeah. So there you go. Don't belong to a religion. It's bad for you. Yeah. So I've got another video here, which is coming from the Jewish perspective. It's rather long, but bear with it. There's good points made, although it's broadcast on what's it called, GBH, not grievous bodily harm, but the GB News, I mean, which is a right-wing biased outlet.
For nearly a year now, I've been scared. Waking up last October 7th to reports of Hamas's invasion of Israel, I desperately tried to make sense of the horror seen in the footage being put out by the terrorists themselves. Initially, I was scared for those who'd been dancing at a music festival, grieving those who tried to escape and were shot down in cold blood. I was scared for kibbutzes and towns close to the Israel-Gaza border, for the families hiding within their homes, those same homes deliberately set alight, families still inside. I was scared for the state of Israel and for my friends and family who live there. And perhaps, most of all, I was scared for the hostages, all 250 of them, but in particular, Naama Levy, with that terrible bloodstain on her tracksuit bottoms indicating sexual assault. I was terrified for the further horrors that they'd be subjected to. That night, though, when a clip emerged of people in the UK, British citizens on British soil, celebrating the worst mass slaughter of Jews since World War II, that was the first time I became scared for myself, for my family. Less than 24 hours after the invasion had been thwarted, as I joined fellow Jews gathered in central London in silent prayer for the dead, just up the road there were flares being set off, an anarchic mass celebration of the worst of humanity with no police in sight. That's when I became scared for the fate of the British Jewish community. In the ensuing months, those concerns only increased. My children were told to remove their school blazers for their own safety because they attend a Jewish school. Should I start tucking my Star of David inside my shirt after a man screamed "Free Palestine" at me on the tube? We were worried about going to synagogue, as it's on the route of one of the marches that's plagued our cities and towns every weekend. Hundreds of thousands of people openly chanting for the genocide of Jews, carrying Nazi-era placards, yet none of them seemingly wanting peace enough to call for Hamas to return the hostages. Instead, there were flags proudly displayed of prescribed terrorist organizations. Worse than that, when a legion of men openly called for jihad, our own police force gaslit us with jihad has many, many meanings. Contrast that with someone holding up a poster stating a fact recognised by the laws of this land that Hamas are terrorists and they were the ones arrested. And that is why I'm now also scared for you, for all of us, for the UK, for the West. Even though it was Israel that was this week subjected to the largest ballistic missile attack in history from Iran, even though it's Israel that has last year sacrificed its youth trying to get the hostages back and now fights for its citizens to return home after being displaced by more than 8,000 rockets Hezbollah have fired. Make no mistake, it's the West that's also under threat. Worse than that, it's the West that are likely to remain so. For in the Middle East, there are glimmers of hope. Hamas's brigades are largely dismantled. Hezbollah's leadership destroyed. The Islamic regime in Iran has never looked more fragile, just in time, with their achieving of nuclear weapons only months away. And if the mullahs do fall, there is the first real chance in the region for peace. Other countries, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, even Saudi Arabia, have already come to see that recognising the right of Israel to exist with friendship and cooperation is what's most beneficial to all. The Iranian people may soon, too, be free to grasp that possibility. Lebanon can be free of Hezbollah. Gaza can be free of Hamas. It's only with Hamas gone that the Palestinian people have any chance of a peaceful and prosperous state of their own. And yes, I've too been scared for the sake of their innocence, cynically, consciously, strategically used by Hamas as shields. However, if the Middle East does come through this and enter a golden era, much of the West will still not be free. Many of our institutions will remain captured by ideologies that run counter to Western liberal democracy. The UN with actual terrorists on its payroll. NGOs lying and parroting terrorist propaganda. Academia teaching and supporting its students who want to dismantle our society, to rewrite history and facts and even language. Genocide, apartheid, starvation, ethnic cleansing, terms now rendered meaningless. And then there's the media. Woe the media, our national broadcaster, who we have no choice but to finance out of our pockets, even in the wake of 2 damning reports proving their bias. This week, repeatedly platformed supporters of anti-West regimes allowed terrorist supporters to sprout unhinged lies and anti-Semitism with little to no pushback. And through all of these institutions and beyond, Islamists and the far left and the useful idiots and the brainwashed youths have been allowed to operate freely as they strive to destroy what our forebears built and fought for. They are the ones who I'm scared of. They are the ones we should all be scared of. And they are the ones that moving forward, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And we're going to have to figure out a way to do so which doesn't undermine the liberal democracy that we are trying to protect. We have to maintain our freedoms and rights and free speech and dissent and blasphemy and equality laws. And that's the crux then, isn't it? Fear has been used for nefarious purposes in the past. McCarthyism had its origins in a legitimate fear. So we are going to have to somehow find a way down a twisty, complicated path to get through this without getting lost. I don't know the shape of that path. What I do know is it begins with a simple step, which is to state, I am scared.
Powerful, eh? You see,
I started off quite sympathetic to him, and he lost me. There wasn't a lot of nuance in what he was saying. There wasn't any understanding for, you know, Hamas say 40,000 people have died in Gaza. Well, probably 20,000 civilians, something like that. That is an incredible number of people who've died. Tersia, you put something on Facebook recently about how certain people within Israel have used the October the 7th attack for dishonest propaganda purposes, Netanyahu in particular. Yeah. And they have I mean, what happened on October the 7th was appalling and terrible, and, you know, we condemn it utterly. But Netanyahu said things like they were putting babies in ovens. And they weren't. There's no evidence of that. He said they were beheading babies. And again, the video that you put on Facebook showed there's no evidence of that. No decapitated babies' bodies were found. And I felt he had no nuance. You know, he started well and he lost me.
I'm afraid he lost me too. And the main reason he lost me is that the only thing he said that makes any sense to me was the part where he said we need to forge a new path, and then he followed that up by saying all I know is that I'm afraid, and that is so. No, I'm not impressed. I don't think we need contributions like that.
Well, you see,
sorry, go on, John.
I flagged it up as a point of view from the Jewish side and coming from a right-wing media outlet.
Yeah.
But the point is surely that there's no escape now. There's no hiding. Thanks to globalism, you know, we can all mix up, and thanks to the internet, their issues are here. They are everywhere. And what are we going to do?
Yeah, I mean, the Jews who go to central London and who come across these demonstrations, which are not that many. I mean, you know, the one in Manchester is relatively small. You know, they're in restricted areas. They're the ones. Yes, they can be afraid, and we have to understand them. And they'll be afraid when they come across small groups of similar sorts of people. We understand that, but you know, I think that that is quite separate from an analysis of the war that's going on, and I think there is a huge difference in the indiscriminate violence of Hamas on one side, albeit much at a lower level, and the much more targeted attempts to suppress Hamas by the Israelis, in which they announce what they're going to do and let people get out of the way. And I think I mean, we don't know the stats yet, but when for instance, they blew up the pages, well, that was incredibly targeted. I mean, there were a few bystanders injured, but but something like 90% or plus of those who are injured or taken out were terrorists. That's never been done in war before. It's pretty good in terms of the laws of war and the duty to avoid civilian casualties.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the question of the Israelis' rules of engagement, isn't there? I read an article some time ago that how many civilians do you kill in order to get one of your enemies? And when they recently in central Beirut destroyed a building because they thought there was a leading Hezbollah commander in it, did they know how many civilians were in that building? What are the rules of engagement? How many innocent civilians do you kill in order to get that commander of Hezbollah?
Yeah,
there's a question there, isn't there?
There is a
and
question.
the other thing I want to ask is, okay, so now you've taken out 90% of the top leadership. Is that vacuum going to remain? Number one, is there nobody who's going to refill those vacancies? And who are you going to get to fill those vacancies? Are the people that, so number one, are those vacancies going to remain unfilled? Nobody's going to step up and take charge. And what if the people that step up and take charge are worse than the ones that you took out?
Well, that's a very good point. Yeah. Which they may well be, and less experienced.
And perhaps, well, and except that by now they will have way more experience in violence and bloodshed and suffering. And I listened to a former Jewish Israeli. He was at Camp David talks. He spoke. So he used to be. He's retired. He was quite high up in the Israeli government, and I watched an interview with him, and he said something that struck me as really pertinent. And I think that's why I said the leadership is the problem. He said he does not see Netanyahu and Israel having any long-term strategy. There's no long-term strategy.
No.
And that is a problem.
They're reacting because
it's just reacting. That's it.
Netanyahu knows that if he collapses in any sense, he's going to end up in jail. Meanwhile, in the States, because we've just had the anniversary of October the 7th, haven't we? So in Brooklyn, there was a memorial service. At the White House, President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden were joined by Rabbi Aaron Alexander for a Yarzeit candle lighting ceremony. Vice President Kamala Harris, that slip of the tongue, she's not president yet. Vice President Kamala Harris marked the anniversary at the Naval Observatory residence, where she planted a pomegranate tree, and former President Donald Trump was scheduled to hold an event with Jewish leaders at his golf course in Miami. There you go.
Where he told them to vote for him, and the fact that he lost the previous election is because the Jews didn't vote for them, so vote for me.
Oh, is he saying he lost the previous election now?
Well, no, he's not saying that. But he sort of said the reason that he's had to claim that he hasn't won it is because the Jews didn't vote for him. So, yeah, but then again, it's Trump. He can do the weave. He can say anything.
Yeah, Pope Francis. He's got his nose into this too. He has invited Catholics and even non-believers to join him in a day of fasting and prayer to remember the anniversary of the violent attack by Hamas terrorist forces against Israel. So he's coming out on one side. The trouble is, this is a polarizing issue. People are not actually personally involved in it. They don't have a stake in this game, but we're all being forced to adopt a side.
Yeah, I see. He said those who cause war will be subject to the inflexible judgment of God.
Yes.
Well, what happened to the just war doctrine? I wonder. And also, inflexible. I thought God was supposed to be merciful. So I don't know where the Pope's coming from. I suspect he's a heretic.
Yes, probably.
And is the Pope a Catholic? Is the question, isn't it?
Yeah. So hands up here. Who's worried about facing the wrath of God? Oh, look. No hands.
Okay. I think I'm all right. I just check the weather. You know, I just make sure there's no thunderclouds nearby or no tornadoes or anything like that.
That will be Thor, not the Pope's God.
So my question then is, was Hamas's decision on October 7th forgivable, if that's the case? Because that's specifically what the Pope was referring to. He was making strong rhetorical statements about people like Hamas who are deliberately triggering vast inflammatory regional conflict on purpose. Is that a decision for which even God could not forgive from their parlance?
Yeah.
I mean, my point of view is that God doesn't exist, and the only people who might forgive anything are the Jews. And forgiveness is going to be mutual forgiveness is going to be part of any settlement, any peace, any lasting, reconstruction of something worth having.
And it's going to be the end of Netanyahu's power. So that's not going to, is it? So moving on, Malaysia. Getting back to the usual child abuse scandals that we have every week to report on, hundreds of children were rescued from orphanages linked to Global Ikhwan Services and Business, which is a vast Islamic business network. So the Royal Malaysia Police launched Operation Global on September the 11th, just a couple of days ago. No, a month and a couple of days ago, which led to the rescue of over 400 children aged 1 to 17, many of whom had been subjected to sexual abuse, including sodomy. It never stops, does it?
No, it's very sad.
I wonder if God will forgive them for what they did to little children.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
What's
that one about the millstone around the neck?
Yeah, but Guy, that's only if you
different God. That's Yahweh. This is
oh, this is Allah.
This is Allah.
But
but also the millstone around the neck is only if you lead the little ones astray from God. Then you will be punished. It's you will not be punished if you harm them or abuse them.
Right.
It's not. That's not how. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. But that's the way I read it.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you'll regard this as good news or bad news or neutral news, and I haven't been able to find out very much about it. But according to a referendum that took place in Switzerland, 51% voted yes to banning Islamic face coverings, burqas, and niqabs. So this, I don't know whether that's a faked picture, but that's supposed to be a sign on a telegraph pole in Switzerland.
It's interesting.
What would you think about that?
Well, I mean, something has to be done to rein in Islamic sort of orthodoxy that imposes itself on everyone else. So I think the liberal basis is that you can believe whatever you like as long as you don't. It doesn't interfere with normal sort of social relations in the public domain, and I think that's what a face covering does actually do.
Yeah.
It kind of undermines the relationship that one can have with a person who is covered.
Yeah. And if it was a burqa, sorry, not a burqa, a what was it the IRA used to cover their heads with?
Balaclava.
Balaclava, yes.
Similar word to burqa, balaclava. But do you get face covering issues in Kentucky, Eric? I mean, I don't know whether it's a. Do the police discourage hiding your identity in that way?
I don't really see it in Kentucky a lot. You know, the hijab or just like the headscarf is, you know, common to see on campus again. But yeah, I really don't see it. You know, I'm thinking in the airport would be probably the most problematic place, but not very widespread here.
Well, keep it that way.
It's too humid here in the summer, so.
Maybe.
I have ambivalent feelings about the ban.
Yeah.
And I absolutely hear what Guy says about the human building a relationship. In fact, my mom she was saying she had a little boy in her classroom before she retired, and his mom came to see her, and she literally had just the slit for the eyes, and even that had balls in front of it. And my mom says it was really difficult for her to have a conversation with this woman because all she saw was the cloth going in and out as this woman breathed. So I get that 100%. But if one bans it, is it going to solve the problem? And is it not going to do more harm in the long run in terms of fostering more extremism and encouraging more polarization? Because now the people who want to wear the hijab, they and the people who feel strongly about it, now they have something tangible that they can fight against. They can fight the ban. And so I have a very deep discomfort with the idea of banning that. And
banning is too angry, isn't it? It just gives them a target to hit back at. But do you remember, Tersia, we had a lovely free thought hour with David Livingstone Smith on dehumanization. You remember?
I remember.
And it seems to me that wearing a face covering, whether it's a balaclava or a burqa or whatever, is an attempt to dehumanize people. Because one of the characteristics, and I expect Seth might agree with me on this, that is fairly peculiar to humans as a species is facial expressions. And if you hide that, then you've lost your humanity to an extent.
So
also our faces are unique, aren't they?
I do have a interesting personal observation. I'm somewhat in agreement that I'm ambivalent on the issue. On one hand, you know, I'm from like a morality standpoint. I think the idea of like religiously ritualizing the oppression of female identity and autonomy is disgusting and should be spoken down. But I don't know that like hard and fast legal bans are justifiable unless you can point out there's like strings of bank robberies with niqabs or hard and fast like problems that are requiring legal intervention. I'd be much more in favor of like more propaganda campaigns or just kind of allowing outspoken atheist people to throw up billboards and just have a culture war about it like we do here. But I will point out that in my own personal experience, as much as like, yeah, I find the argument about like identity and faces compelling. Ironically, you know, I happen to socialize a lot online and use Discord when I'm playing games with friends. And as a somewhat curious side effect of that, there are some people who I will have regular social interactions with for over multiple years, and I don't actually know what they look like.
Yeah.
So it's like that. I don't know that like that on its own is a basis to say this should be made illegal by the government. But I'm totally in favor of like, you know, putting out you know, either propaganda or just opening up forums for culture wars on the subject. You know, we certainly have plenty of that here for other topics.
That's one of the strange things about the internet, isn't it? It's suddenly put us at a distance so that we can text each other, and as you say, never get to know what person looks like at all, or even hear their voice in some cases. So this is a weird new social medium that we've got to come to terms.
In my day job for most of my life, I was involved in language schools and taught a lot of Saudis. And about 10 years ago, the first Saudi women started coming as opposed to men. And a very common pattern would be the woman would arrive with the hijab. And after a few weeks, this would turn into a hat. And gradually strands of hair would appear from under the hat. And if they stay for about 6 months, the hat would finally be removed. And occasionally we'd get Saudi women. I taught one recently who was very glamorous, wore a lot of makeup and no sign of any headscarf whatsoever. And she was in class with another woman who was completely covered apart from her eyes. And the two of them got on very well. They were quite pally with each other.
So you see, that's what I think the point I'm trying to make. We can do nothing about Islamic men who force their women, and Islamic women who force their own little girls, and who feel that they want to do it. I can have my opinion on that, and I can think it's really stupid and it shouldn't happen. But ultimately, I can't use legislation to enforce the banning of that behavior, because ultimately, yes, it's hot and we think it's terrible because we think it's dehumanizing, but we can't legislate what people think and what they want to do. And it's not as if it's an explicitly harmful practice. It's not like female genital mutilation or and also, if I don't know how many bank robberies have been done in women wearing hijabs, you know. So that would be a good reason to say, listen, we've had so many armed robberies, and people came into the store wearing hijabs, and that's a real problem.
Yeah. It has happened. People are sometimes it's been men dressed in burqas pretending to be women who have committed some sort of atrocity, being completely non-identifiable. But the elephant in this room that we're not mentioned is the fact that this is all about girls, all about the garb that girls wear. What would happen if it was compulsory for men in Western society to all wear a top hat? How much traction do you think that would gather?
Well, there was a time when it was almost compulsory to be.
Yeah, but that was fashion. That was fashion. That wasn't compulsion. That was.
I mean, the interesting bit here is the question of the argument between compulsion and persuasion, and I tend to fall more on the persuasion side. But I think we need to do more to do that. And the fact that some countries think that the time has come to actually ban it is an interesting point.
Yeah.
And it should bring the matter much more forcefully, I think, to our attention that, you know, it is a problem. You know, we tend to say, oh, let them get on with it. We don't really want to sort of rock the boat. That's our sort of attitude in this country. And I'm beginning to think that's not good enough, because we are faced with a mass of people whose culture is very distinct and actually antagonistic to.
Okay, but hang on. If that's the argument, then you also have to ban the wearing of. I mean, the Pakistani men wear those robes. You have to also, in my opinion, then ban the little Jewish thingy-majiggy.
No. I'm talking about face covering, Tersia.
Well, yeah.
Is the problem the face covering, or is the problem the religious garb?
No, there have been occasions when bans have existed for men. Early in the Islamic Republic in Iran, men were banned from not having a beard.
Oh yes.
And round about the same time, the junta in Argentina banned men from having a beard.
And also,
So if you took a flight from Argentina to Iran, or Iran to Argentina, you'd have to shave your beard off on the way.
Or grow it quickly.
In Afghanistan, they also specify the length of your hair generally and things like that, don't they?
It's weird, isn't it? Boudreau, how I think of Kentucky as the center of libertarian macho attitudes. How do you think the men in your part of the world would succumb to compulsion?
No, I don't think so. I was actually thinking about there is a men-centered compulsion that does exist, and it's in your part of the world, in Europe. Recently, when we were planning for a trip to some countries in Europe, we were told, now don't go show up at any of these bathhouses or pools with American swim trunks. You need to wear the tight-fitting bikini bottoms. And isn't that kind of a social compulsion?
Yes.
And so I'm picturing that in Kentucky. If you told the good old boys in Kentucky that you couldn't go to the swimming pool in your American flag swim trunks, you gotta wear that. you would hear some complaints, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I think we're verging into fashion here, but we're running out of time.
I've never heard that kind of ban. I'm wondering whether it was advice so as not to provoke anti-American sentiment or something.
So
I don't know.
I want to just touch on a couple of other items as we go out of this show. And one is, there's been an advert put out by the Democrats, and it featured a clip from 1988 when Reverend Billy Graham was pictured wearing glasses in a grey suit and tie, and he was saying, "But you must realize that in the last days the times will be full of danger. Men will become utterly self-centered and greedy for money." And then that clip stops and another clip comes in which features former President Donald Trump, and he's standing before a row of American flags at a campaign rally in Des Moines, Iowa, and he's saying, "My whole life I've been greedy. I've grabbed all the money I can get. I'm so greedy." And you won't be surprised to hear that video has disappeared off the internet and is probably going to be the subject of a legal suit.
Good luck with that one.
Finally, a bit of good news. The National Secular Society in the UK has called for an end to religious privilege in equality law.
Yeah, high time.
About time. Absolutely.
No, we want an end to all religious privilege, not just in equality law. I mean, the whole concept of religious privilege obviously flies in the face of the church-state separation and general principles of equality. Yeah.
What a good note to end on, eh?
Some good news somewhere in the world.
Yeah. So, guys, thank you very much. You've been fantastic. I've loved this show. I hope you have too. So, and thank you, viewers, future viewers, because you haven't seen it yet, have you? Wait till I've uploaded. Be patient. Okay, say goodbye. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carrying drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?